More than 8,000 new COVID-19 cases reported in South Korea, a new record high daily tally. Authorities plan to switch to Omicron-related measures. North Korea reportedly test-fired 2 cruise missiles. Seoul and Washington carry out further studies to verify the details. South Korea is sending a government delegation to the Beijing Games. This comes amid diplomatic boycott decision by several countries. Hello, it's good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let us begin with the top story at this hour. The nation's COVID-19 tally reached a record daily high. New measures will take effect on Wednesday. They will be designed to curb the surge more efficiently. This includes conducting PCR tests only for people at high risk. Shin Yeon starts us off.
South Korea on Tuesday saw a record high number of new infections. The country logged 8,571 new COVID-19 cases, which was up by around 4,500 from a week ago. Officials are attributing the spike to the rapid spread of the Omicron variant, which is now the dominant strain and accounts for more than half of all new cases nationwide. Son Young-rae, a senior health official, said in a radio interview with local broadcaster CBS on Tuesday that Omicron could account for more than 90% of all new cases in 2 to 3 weeks' time. Accordingly, the country might see daily figures surpass 20 to 30,000 in February. Regions like Honam, as well as Gyeongsangbuk-do and Gangwon-do provinces in particular, have been hit the hardest. 8 out of 10 infections in Korea's southwestern Honam region were the Omicron variant. Omicron accounted for 70% of all new infections in Gyeongsangbuk-do province, whereas in Gangwon-do province, this number stood at nearly 60%. The variant has also triggered a string of cluster infections in the Greater Seoul area. It's responsible for nearly 90% of all cases in the city of Pyeongtaek in Gyeonggi-do province and is spreading rapidly after a mass outbreak at a U.S. military base and a nursing home. The country is set to launch a new set of prevention guidelines on Wednesday that have been specifically drawn up to tackle Omicron. Making the most efficient use of Korea's medical resources will be the primary focus. COVID-19 screening centers will only conduct PCR testing on high-risk groups and those suspected to be infected. Everyone else will have to test themselves at screening centers, but using rapid antigen test kits instead. The latest measures will first kick off on Wednesday in the southwestern city of Gwangju, the surrounding Jeollanam-do province, and the cities of Pyeongtaek and Ansong in Gyeonggi-do province. The government is planning to expand these testing protocols nationwide as early as the end of this month or early February. Also, the self-isolation period for fully vaccinated COVID-19 patients will be reduced from 10 days to 7. Shin Yeon, Arirang News.
More people in the nation could be eligible to take coronavirus antivirus pills. This comes with more Omicron cases reported locally. According to Seoul's PM, authorities review lowering the age limit from the current 60 and older to those in their 50s. Kim Woo-kyum said the decision lies on various factors, including the procurement status and the effectiveness of the drug. However, he downplayed concerns of a spike in Omicron cases, pointing to the country's high vaccination rate. More than 50% of the population have received their 3rd dose. The WHO chief warns against assuming the pandemic is in its so-called endgame, as there are likely more new variants to come. Omicron is fueling a surge in cases in Japan, which is set to expand its quasi-state of emergency to more regions. Kim Yo-sun tells us more.
The head of the WHO is insisting it's not safe to assume Omicron will be the last variant of COVID-19.
But it's dangerous to assume that Omicron will be the last variant or that we are in the endgame. On the contrary, globally, the conditions are ideal for more variants to emerge. To change the course of the pandemic, we must change the conditions that are driving it.
However, addressing an executive board meeting of the WHO on Monday, he added the acute phase of the pandemic could still end this year if certain key targets are met. To do so, he stressed the international community needs to reach goals like the WHO's target to vaccinate 70% of the population of each country by the middle of 2022. He also stressed that improving testing and sequencing rates are also crucial to track the virus as well as emerging variants. Battling an intense Omicron surge, Japan is set to expand its quasi-state of emergency to 34 of the country's 47 prefectures. The measures, which will run through late February, include the shortening of opening hours for multi-use facilities like restaurants and bars. In China, authorities on Monday lifted the harsh COVID-19 lockdown imposed on the city of Xi'an. This comes after a month of some of the toughest public health measures in the world. However, the drastic lockdown appears to have worked, as the city, home to some 13 million people, has now reported a new case after daily infections hit a peak of over 330 in late December. The U.S. is also witnessing a drop in new infections, with its average daily new cases over the past 7 days dropping to around 690,000. This is down from the country's peak of over 800,000 reported 2 weeks ago. Despite the drop in new cases and hospitalizations across the U.S., COVID-19 deaths hit an 11-month high on Sunday, up 11% on week. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
North Korea appears to have launched 2 cruise missiles. This would be the regime's 5th missile test in a month. Seoul's military is carrying out assessments to verify the exact details. Bae Eun-ji brings the updates.
South Korean military officials say that North Korea appears to have launched 2 cruise missiles on Tuesday morning. They said the missiles were fired from an inland area and that assessments are being carried out to verify the details. The officials declined to say which direction the missiles were fired, only that it was not toward the East Sea. They also said that because of the Earth's curvature, it's hard to detect when North Korea launches missiles from an inland area and that they fly at lower altitudes and at lower speeds. But the officials did say that if such missiles were to be fired toward the south, Seoul has the capability to detect and intercept them, no matter what altitude they travel at. This is the 5th time this month that the regime has conducted some kind of missile test, after launching what it claimed were hypersonic missiles and short-range ballistic missiles. Ballistic missiles arch upwards before descending to reach their target, whereas cruise missiles remain within the atmosphere while flying. Also, ballistic missiles are powered by rockets on their way up, and can carry nuclear or conventional warheads. But cruise missiles are powered by jet engines throughout their full journey and can fly as low as a few meters off the ground, which makes them harder to detect. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff always reports right away when the North launches a ballistic missile, but does not officially report on the regime's cruise missile launches. Cruise missiles usually generate less interest because, unlike ballistic missiles, they are not banned under UN sanctions imposed on Pyongyang. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
The nation's unification minister urged once again Pyongyang to return to dialogue and cooperation. Lee In-young emphasized that's the only way to re-establish peace on the peninsula. Kim Da-mi shares with us his remarks.
Dialogue and cooperation with Pyongyang are the only ways to achieve peace on the Korean peninsula, and now is the right moment to reboot the peace process. South Korea's unification minister Lee In-young said this on Tuesday at the New Year's policy briefing attended by foreign officials based in Seoul, including Andrei Kulik, the Russian ambassador, Chris Green, the U.S. acting deputy chief of mission, and 8 international organizations.
The South Korean government would like to underline that dialogue and cooperation are the only ways to achieve peace on the Korean peninsula while preparing for the possibility of further action by the North.
He added that now is the time to reignite the peace process, pointing out concerns that inter-Korean ties could revert to the tension and stalemates of the past. The minister also noted the possibility that uncertainties could grow in the latter half of the year. With such possibilities in mind, Lee pledged to lay the foundation for unshakable peace, with measures including a declaration to end of Korean War and cooperation on humanitarian aid for the North. That's also in line with what he said the same day at the 2022 Korea Peace Forum. There, he reiterated that an end-of-war declaration would be a useful catalyst to move the frozen denuclearization talks forward, saying it's appropriate for the North to return to dialogue and cooperation instead of choosing missile launches. The minister further voiced hope of moving forward together even through small cooperative projects in practical fields such as healthcare, the environment, and natural disasters. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
South Korea is going to send its third largest Winter Olympic squad to China, as well as a government delegation led by the country's culture minister. They will begin departing for Beijing from the 20th of this month. Han Sung-woo has the full story.
With less than 2 weeks remaining until Beijing 2022, South Korea has announced it will be sending a total of 63 athletes to the Chinese capital. It's set to be the third largest Winter Olympic squad the country has ever assembled, behind 146 athletes on home soil in Pyeongchang 2018 and 71 for the Sochi Games in 2014.
I'm excited and nervous at the same time. Feels like my first Olympics. I'll do my best to finish strong.
I want to confidently show the world how hard I've trained and leave Beijing without any regrets.
Among the VIPs present on Tuesday's pre-Olympic press conference in Seoul were presidential candidates Yoon Suk-yeol and An Cheol-soo, who offered encouragement to the athletes. Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum was also there and called on the athletes to do their best, but also enjoy what could be the event of their lives. In Beijing, Korean Olympians will be accompanied by 61 officials, including COVID-19 response staff, as the nation aims to win 1 or 2 gold medals and finish in the top 15 of the medal standings. It's a modest goal considering Team Korea won at least 5 golds at 3 of the past 4 Winter Games. Leading South Korea's diplomatic representation in Beijing will be Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, Hwang Hee, who will be attending next Friday's opening ceremony. Speaker of the National Assembly, Park Byung-seok, will also be there as part of his parliamentary trip to China next month. Park's visit will, however, be separate from the Korean government's official Olympic delegation. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
In 2021, South Korea achieved its economic growth target of 4%, which is the fastest expansion in 11 years. Strong figures were recorded in Q4, backed by solid exports and private spending. Ji-young helps us look beyond the digits.
Last year, according to the Bank of Korea, the South Korean economy grew at the fastest pace in 11 years. The Bank of Korea said Tuesday that the country's gross domestic product adjusted for inflation grew at 4%, which is in line with the BOK's forecast. It's a rebound from the negative growth of 0.9% seen the year before, which supports the BOK's continuing move away from its emergency stimulus measures. Exports, which were the mainstay of economic growth in 2021, rose by almost 10% on-year. Another main driver was an on-year rise in private spending of 3.6%.
Despite the surge in infections due to the spread of the COVID-19 variant, South Korea's exports, mainly semiconductors, chemical products, and automobile parts, have surged along with the globally expanding vaccine drive. Also, domestically, consumer sentiment has improved with the government's relief policies, the activation of online classes, and as people got used to the pandemic.
The new data for Q4 of last year show that the recovery remained on track, expanding by 1.1% from the quarter before. This was the 6th straight quarter of growth, again supported by strong export demand and a pickup in consumption. Exports increased by 4.3% on quarter, led by semiconductors, coal, and petroleum products. Spending in the private sector increased by 1.7% in Q4 on quarter, led by restaurants and lodging, which got a boost from a temporary easing of the distancing rules before the start of Omicron. Commenting on last year's growth in a social media post, Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki stressed that South Korea has achieved the fastest and strongest economic recovery among the G20 member countries. Hong noted that Korea was able to minimize the contraction in 2020 and return to strong growth in the pandemic's second year, a sign, he said, of the Korean economy's undeniable strength in times of crisis. Ji-young, Arirang News.
The IMF praised Seoul for financially overcoming the pandemic while minimizing economic damage. The global organization highlighted that the Korean New Deal sets a good example of reform in the post-pandemic era. Choi Min-jung explains further.
The International Monetary Fund has evaluated South Korea as a global model country for its economic efforts amid the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the Ministry of Finance on Tuesday, the remarks came during a virtual meeting between Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi and IMF's Korea Missions Chief Martin Kaufman. Kaufman stressed that South Korea was able to achieve both economic recovery and financial stability while minimizing damage, mainly by containing the spread of the virus and promoting active fiscal and monetary policies. He also positively evaluated the latest supplementary budget worth 14 trillion won, equal to more than $11 billion. Looking from a mid to long-term perspective, Kaufman said the Korean New Deal is a good example of an economic reform for the post-COVID era. The IMF vowed to provide technical support if necessary to achieve net zero carbon in 2050 and raise the carbon emissions target. However, Kaufman also cited the spread of Omicron, disruption of global supply chains, global inflation, and slowing growth rates in the US and China as risk factors facing the Korean economy. He added that the country needs to further secure its fiscal stability. Meanwhile, South Korea's finance minister said the country's overcoming of the pandemic is all thanks to the citizens who trusted the government. And he vowed to make every effort to achieve 3.1% growth in 2022 through implementing flexible quarantine measures and the prompt execution of supplementary budgets. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The nation's top 30 conglomerates saw the combined value of all their affiliates on the stock market rise more than 30% compared to 4 years earlier. Samsung is still the biggest local company, while LG overtook SK as the runner-up. Kim Sung-min has the details.
The richest in South Korea have gotten richer over the past 4 years. According to a market tracker leaders index on Tuesday, South Korea's top 30 conglomerates have seen their combined market capitalization surge 33% to some $1.26 trillion since January 2018. That includes the combined value of some 200 listed firms belonging to those conglomerates. And with battery producer LG Energy Solution and 2 other firms set to go public this year, that figure could go up to $1.6 trillion. By conglomerate, Samsung is still undoubtedly the frontrunner, with its market cap coming to around $539 billion, jumping more than 35% from 2018. Including LG Energy Solution, LG Group comes next with some $188 billion, also replacing SK, which was previously listed second. One of the most noticeable changes was with Kakao Group overtaking 11 others to sit fifth. Among the top 30, it was actually the group that saw the biggest surge in its market cap from 2018 at 750%. And as of 2022, its market cap is nearing $73 billion. The huge leap was largely thanks to the successful debuts of Kakao Games, Kakao Bank, and Kakao Pay last year. On the other hand, Lotte Group saw a decline in its market cap, dropping down to 12th from 8th. However, the group to see the largest drop was HDC Hyundai Development Group over a series of safety accidents at their large-scale construction sites. Dropping almost 50%, the market cap of 4 listed firms of the conglomerate now stands at around $1.5 billion. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
LG Energy Solution will set up its third EV battery factory in the States. According to the South Korean firm, $2.1 billion will be spent in building the facility as part of an equal joint venture with General Motors. 2 plants are already being constructed, one in Ohio and the other in Tennessee, with operations set to begin as early as this year. LG Energy Solution plans to invest more than $4 billion by 2024 to expand its presence in the U.S. The announcement comes ahead of its listing on South Korea's KOSPI. Data shows employment rate among South Korean women is back to pre-pandemic levels. Hiring rose mainly for those in their 20s, but about half of the new jobs are only temporary. Here's Min Soo-kyun with a deeper analysis.
More females in South Korea were employed last year compared to before the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, the employment rate for women recovered to near pre-pandemic levels, according to the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family on Tuesday. The number of women in jobs stood at 11.7 million in 2021, up 202,000 from the previous year. In other words, the employment rate for women last year was 57.7%, pretty close to the 57.8% recorded in 2019 before the pandemic began. The rise was mostly attributed to women in their 20s. Last year, the employment rate for those aged 20 to 29 was 59.6%, up almost 3 percentage points from a year before. The figure is slightly higher than in 2019. In terms of numbers, a total of 1.9 million women in their 20s were employed last year, up 87,000 from a year earlier. But the ministry raised concerns over their job security, as around half of the jobs were regular employments, while the remaining half were temporary posts. Meanwhile, the employment rate for women in their 30s remained low. In particular, the employment rate for women aged 35 to 39 dropped 1.1 percentage points to 57.5%. The ministry explained this was likely because many women were compelled to take care of their children amid the pandemic, making it difficult for them to return to work. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
As the situation in Ukraine grows more tense, Washington has put troops on alert for potential deployment to Eastern Europe as reinforcements. They'll be deployed if NATO activates its forces or if other situations develop, meaning an invasion by Russia. Yu Young-eun has the latest.
The U.S. is putting 8,500 troops on high alert ahead of a potential deployment to Europe if needed, amid rising fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Pentagon on Monday said the measure is at the direction of President Joe Biden. But Press Secretary John Kirby said no final decisions have been made on deployments and that no troops are intended for deployment to Ukraine itself.
No mission has been assigned to these troops. No deployment orders have been sent to them. What the Secretary has ordered them to do is to be ready to go.
The deployment to Europe, he says, would happen when NATO activates its rapid response force or if other situations develop referring to an invasion. The NATO response force is a multinational force totaling about 40,000 troops. This is in line with what was discussed during a video call between Biden and European allies to reinforce security on NATO's eastern flank.
We have been consulting with allies in deployments and refining plans for all scenarios. In fact, we've never ruled out the option of providing additional assistance in advance of an invasion.
NATO has already begun bolstering its deterrence, with member states like Denmark, France, and Spain deploying troops and ships to join their forces in Eastern Europe. The Kremlin, which has been denying any plan to invade, denounced NATO's latest movements, blaming U.S. and NATO for escalating tensions by distributing misinformation. Russia has massed an estimated 100,000 troops near Ukraine's border, demanding NATO promise to ban Ukraine from joining its alliance, something the West has not agreed to, while warning of serious consequences if there is an invasion. It remains to be seen whether a breakthrough can be reached at the upcoming four-way meeting between officials from Russia, Ukraine, France, and Germany in Paris on Wednesday. Yu Young-eun, Arirang News.
Some lingering showers are coming and going tonight. Although most of the rain has tapered off, western regions will see light drizzles for the remainder of the night. Other inland regions where nighttime temperatures are colder, light snowflakes will be flying around. For mountainous regions of Gangwon-do province, heavier snowfall is expected with about 2 to 5 centimeters in the forecast. Similar weather conditions are expected for tomorrow, with readings hovering around the seasonal norms. Relatively warmer air will trigger more fine dust particles to flow in. Western regions, including the Seoul metropolitan area, will see poor air quality for tomorrow. Morning lows will be 1 to 3 degrees lower than today. Seoul will start off at -2 degrees. Expect partly cloudy to overcast skies for the daytime. Seoul will get up to 4 degrees. Daejeon and Gwangju 8 and Busan will reach 11 degrees. No significant cold is in the forecast for the last week of January. For this weekend, clear skies are expected for the capital region. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries